Hi, my name is Kevin Thomas, W1DED. Today I'm honored to have Tom Frenaye K1KI joining me from Suffield, Connecticut. Tom was a co-founder of the New England QSO Party, which along with Florida, California, and W7 are the fourth largest QSO parties in the country. He also happens to be a co-founder of the California QSO Party, so clearly he has a lot of experience in this area. Tom, thanks for joining me.
Hey, nice to be here. Thank you.
So I guess I want to start with California because I was surprised to read that you had co-founded that event, and it's an event that I have a lot of fun with. I've entered a couple times and done pretty well from the Northeast. Tell me what you were thinking when you started that contest.
I was in high school, and a friend and I, well, actually, we had 7 of us that got licensed at the same time. We had a great junior high school teacher, science teacher, and he got us interested and licensed, and at least a couple of us got on the air. And one of the first things we did, other than talking to a neighbor 10 miles away, was to get on 40 meters and start talking to people across the country. And after not too long, I upgraded from novice to general and got on HF a bit more. And we kind of got interested in contesting through DX contest, and then we ran into a couple of QSO parties that existed. This was in the late 60s. I was in, it was probably 1966 or 67. I was, or maybe, yeah, I think I was probably a sophomore or a junior in high school when we started the New England QSO, the California QSO Party, because there was none. At that point, there was one in Pennsylvania, and I think there might have been another one or two somewhere, but nothing in California. I lived in Southern California through high school, moved to Northern California a little later on, and then back to the East Coast after college. And so we had a good time. We ran it a couple of years. And then, as with all high school radio clubs at the time, people graduate and you have to replenish them. And we didn't have much to fill the bill. And so we turned it over to a guy in Northern California who ended up taking the California QSO Party for a few years. And then it turned into something that the Northern California Club took over and has run it 40 years, probably 30, 40 years since then. And so that's always been in my mind about New England, because New England has in the past had QSO parties on an individual state basis. And the big issue was that there just wasn't enough activity to be exciting, at least for me. I thought, you have a QSO party for a Vermont or New Hampshire or Rhode Island or Maine, and you get a good number of stations active, but not a lot. And it didn't ever last very long. And the activity kind of came and disappeared. So W1RH, who's now in California, incidentally, and I talked about it. He was involved with the Massachusetts QSO Party. And we talked about getting something started in New England, and we developed a set of rules and tried them out about a little over 20 years ago now. So California comes to New England, and then he moved to California.
So when you and W1RH were talking about a New England QSO Party, I understand the foundation, this idea that a lot of smaller states in New England that couldn't really support one on their own. Was the idea back then that there would not be single state QSO parties in New England and they would all be combined up?
Well, that was the hope at the time, that they would join in with us, and I would say they all did. But in the last 5 or 7 years, there's been a lot more contest activity, and some of those states now have their own QSO party. Vermont has a pretty successful one. Maine has one. New Hampshire has one. I don't think Connecticut, Mass, and Rhode Island do at this point. But the individual QSO parties tend to happen in the wintertime. And the view with the New England contest was, in order to attract mobiles, doing it in the wintertime is just too chancy. The roads just aren't predictable enough to be open. We looked at a lot of weekends and trying to figure out what the best one was. And at the time, there was not much happening in early May. And we decided to start it in May, and the first weekend of May. And that's worked out pretty well. We originally adjusted it so it didn't conflict with the Hostraders Amfest in New Hampshire. That's on actually a different weekend now, so it's not as important. But actually, May is a really good time to have it, which is the first weekend of May we have every year now, because the tourists haven't arrived and the snow is mostly melted in the first week of May. And that works out pretty. The only problem is you run into a lot of potholes on the back roads in May still. They aren't fixed and there's still frost heaves around. So, and one of the fun parts of a New England QSO party is being mobile and driving those back roads and seeing things you wouldn't normally see by sticking on the highway.
So tell me more about the mobile aspect of the New England QSO Party, because I also know that that's a huge part of the California QSO Party, but I don't know that it's necessarily trademarked with a lot of QSO parties. I don't see them putting as much emphasis on it. Was that something that you pursued because of your experience in California, or what brought about that component?
Part of it is I wanted to do mobile, and I talked my wife into driving, so I got to operate, and we got to see a whole lot of New England that we wouldn't normally have seen. It's kind of, being in way northern Vermont and New Hampshire is really a different view of what New England is like. I live in Connecticut, and I'm pretty near some pretty good sized towns. But you get in northern Vermont and New Hampshire and upstate Maine, and there's nothing. It's pretty interesting and pretty different. You just see a whole different world. So I really enjoyed that part of it, just getting out and enjoying a couple of days of driving, or riding, I should say, in my case. And in New England, some of the counties are so small, there is no resident, really active population. So the smallest counties in New England are in northeastern Vermont, and a couple of them in Maine are pretty scarcely populated. So we really wanted to cover all the counties, and I know that's the reason that California has been so successful, and same with Florida, is they really do make an effort to cover all the counties, and because that makes the people from out of state more interested to stick with it and see if they can work all the counties or work all the states. It kind of depends on the goal you have going into it. A lot of people are just looking for the rare states, even in New England. So that's part of it. We've been pretty successful in county coverage. We've almost every year had all of them covered. I will say this last year was not our best year. We only had one person active from Martha's Vineyard, which is a county in Massachusetts that is pretty sparsely settled. But that's how it goes sometimes. You don't get them all.
So how does it look this year in 2024? Do you feel as though they'll all be covered?
One of the complications this year is that in Connecticut, we're making a change because the state itself has changed how it deals with counties and county and government. Connecticut has not had county government for 40 or 50 years. And finally, they have asked the federal government to start thinking of them in terms of their regional planning districts. So it's sort of like, Louisiana has parishes and not counties, and Connecticut now has regional planning districts instead of counties. And it's hard to make the transition, but that's how the federal census is going to work, and that's how federal level data is going to be reported in Connecticut. So slowly everybody is starting to switch over, but it's not an easy process. So anyhow, what I typically do before each New England QSO party is try to gather information on who plans to be active within New England. And there's a large number of fixed stations operating from home. There's a bunch of people that go to some of the rare counties and operate portable. And then there's a group of hopefully at least 10 mobiles that will be out there. Last year we had 13 that sent in logs, and we had more than that were active. So we make an active effort to know which counties will be covered and which ones not. And then I work as much as I can with different clubs in New England to see if I can get coverage in some of the harder to cover counties.
So, Tom, I appreciate the outreach that you're making to get those counties covered. If someone was listening to this and they were curious about, for example, in Maine, which counties might be a little bit more rare, is there a place that they can go?
Yeah, actually, there's a couple of really good ways to do that. One is on our website, which is NEQP, New England QSO Party.org. One of the things we have there is a list of counties and who plans to operate from each of them. And if for mobiles, we try to get their trip itinerary so we know which counties they plan to go to, and we update that between now and early May when the QSO party takes place. So we put that information online. As we get closer to the contest, it fills up, and you can see which ones are not covered. Additionally, we also publish a list by state and by county of how many people were active that year in the contest based on all the logs that we receive. Last year, for instance, we got about 800 logs. And that represented, after the log checking, about 100,000 contacts, of which 2/3 were from New England counties. So you can go through and see 60,000 contacts spread out over 67 counties and see which ones were the hard ones. And there's one in Massachusetts, and the others are all in rural northern Vermont, northern Maine. I think New Hampshire was covered pretty well. So yeah, somebody looking to see if their county is covered can easily find out, in the same way that people from outside New England can see who to look for and which areas they're going to be on from. So we try to make it easy for people to know who's going to be there. Still, you have to get on and find them and work them. At this point, probably 75% of the activity is on CW. About maybe 25% is on sideband, and a small number is on digital modes. One of the issues on digital modes is that FT8, which is very popular, does not make it easy for you to exchange the county information. So people operating FT8 have to work a little bit extra hard with whoever they talk to get the county information and to send it. So that makes it tough there, but we count them the same as a CW contact. So we're working this year. We've changed it so that if you are operating on sideband or digital modes, you can actually spot yourself on the spotting networks. That for CW, that's covered automatically by the reverse beacon network that a lot of people use. But now there'll be a way to get more information about who's active on sideband, as an example.
So I can say from experience with the California QSO Party, it certainly helped to know who was operating where, particularly if they were mobile, because what I discovered late, to my chagrin, was that I knew somebody was in a certain county, but I didn't realize that they were traveling, so they were only there for the first day, and then I go looking for them on Sunday, and It's just not going to happen. So one multiplier gone. So I think that's a really important tip for somebody who's going to operate in the contest, to kind of have an understanding who is where from a fixed location standpoint or mobile. One of the questions I have for you, is there a different category entry for somebody who is operating what I'd call portably but fixed, if you understand what I'm saying, like field day style, maybe going to Aroostook County, or is that considered mobile?
We actually have several different categories for entry. Most people operate what I'll call single operator low power. That means it's them operating a station at 100 watts or less. There's also a high power category, and there's also a QRP category. And those categories, those are the basic ones for single operators. And then there's a category for multi-operator on one transmitter. And this year we added a new category for multi-operator, multi-transmitter, which up until now we haven't had because there just wasn't enough interest or groups of people wanting to operate on multiple bands during the contest at different times. So, and now that there's a lot more sunspots than there were in the past, you can actually work New England stations on more than one band from most of the country. So multi-operator, and then 3 levels of single operator. We actually have a similar category for mobiles. Most mobiles are low power, have a single transceiver, and don't have an amplifier. There's a few that have done mobile operating while QRP, and a few others have had an amplifier with them as well. But that's not the norm. Most are just single operator low power mobile, and the mobiles are counted and scored separately. We do produce results that show a combined score for a mobile, but also what their score is in each county they operate from. And we love it when there's more than one mobile, because like you said, the mobiles, they go into a county, they operate, and then they move to the next one. And if you miss them, you may have missed the county. So we love to see multiple people out and operating. So like for instance, last year we had a dozen mobiles, but they covered 120 counties overall. They have about 10 each. And as a mobile, the most fun about it in a way is that when you get to a new county and people find out you're there, you get an instant pileup for 10 or 15 minutes, and sometimes longer depending on propagation. So instead of it being slow, every time you hit a new county, it all of a sudden perks back up again, and you have a lot of people to work.
So Tom, if I drive to Knox County, Midcoast, Maine, and I set up in a field with a tent and I stay there all weekend, am I considered fixed or mobile?
That'd be fixed. That'd be portable. But yeah, we actually have a separate set of plaques that we award depending on the category and the location. And we do have a couple special plaques for people that go to tough to find, tough to work counties. So in many cases, that's the kind of you might be considered in that category if you're portable like that, and that's been generally the case. And in addition, we have plaques that go to mobiles that are low power and high power, and we've got about 45 to 50 plaques that can be awarded each year. We add them as there's interest and activity.
I should also note that for those people that like to set records, the NEQP has a list of the record holders on your website, which I thought was very useful. So if anybody would like to break a record of the New England QSO Party, you can certainly find that information online. You had already noted, and correct me if I've got this wrong, but I think that 75% of the QSOs are CW, the other 25% sideband. And in part, I presume that's because the points for CW QSOs are greater than sideband QSOs.
Yeah, it's a tough question of how to do that in a fair way. Generally speaking, you can work people faster on sideband if there are a lot of them. If you work a lot of people on sideband, you're generally working a lot of non-contesters or very casual contesters. On CW, you often will work much of the time you'll be working people that are active on the air in contests in the QSO parties themselves, rather than just real casual. So we made a judgment early on that the CW rates are about half that of phone most of the time. And that's why we changed the rule this year to allow for self-spotting, because we really wanted to give a better chance for those that are operating sideband in New England to be noticed, so that people would come find them even if they're low power, and not just focus on the big guys that have beams and kilowatts. So yeah, there's a difference. It's 2 points for CW and digital, and it's 1 point for sideband contacts. The end result is that if you're want to go for a really top score, most of your contacts currently will be on CW. And so, yeah, we're trying to boost the sideband activity.
Which again is consistent with California. When I was talking to Dean Wood, he said it's nearly impossible to actually win anything in the California QSO Party by going sideband only. You're either CW 100% or mixed, which brings me to the question, do you have a mixed category also? Can people operate both phone and CW?
We actually don't have a CW or phone category in the actual score listings. It's all mixed. We do have a couple of specialized plaques for people that operate all CW or all sideband. And those are, again, in that list of 45 or 50 plaques that get awarded. I mean, there's a couple of plaques for school clubs, or one plaque for school clubs. We've got a plaque for the person that has the a log with the fewest errors. We call it the golden log plaque. So that encourages people to be accurate. And then again, in addition to the plaques that are available for stations in New England, we have a similar set of plaques that go to the out-of-state winners. And the out-of-state winners, actually, there's some subcategories, because just because of where New England is located, the people that do the best in working New England stations are usually, I'll call it, one skip zone away on 20 and 40 meters, since that's where most of the activity is. So they're located from Virginia to Florida, or from Illinois to Colorado, 1,000 to 1,500 miles away. That makes it tougher for the West Coast, and it also makes it tougher for the stations that are closer in, like New York or Pennsylvania, because on 20 meters they don't hear most of the New England stations. On 40 meters they will during the day, but many of the New England stations go to the higher bands if they're open. So we do report in the article who the top CW only and phone only and mixed mode stations are, and there's quite a variation in that.
So Tom, before we wrap up, are there any final words you'd have for any listener who hopes to operate in the New England QSO Party first weekend in May?
We'd love to see your activity. We really appreciate the logs that we received, and we prefer to get them electronically. There's some good logging software out there. Commonly, most people use, there's pretty much two major programs that people use. One is N1MM Plus, and that's a very thoroughly written piece of software that covers not only the New England QSO Party that weekend, but there's a couple of others that exist at the same time. So you can work multiple contests. And the second one is by N3FJP, N3 Fox Japan Papa. That's a little bit simpler in terms of its scope and its capabilities, but it's much easier to learn. And that's a good place to start, I would say, for people that are not used to doing much contesting. And N1MM is very thorough, but it has lots of a bigger learning curve, I guess I'll say. So if you can use some contesting software to help out. Logging software in general, we do take files in a variety of formats and can work with anybody that sends in a log if we get something that's a little incomplete or need more information. We still even take logs written on paper. Last year we got when I say 800 logs, and I think 9 of them were on paper. That's okay. We'll type them in order to do the cross-checking, because one of the things we really like to be able to do when we're done, we want to be able to say that's really the winner because we cross-checked the logs and didn't include contacts that were made where people messed up the call signs or messed up the locations. So we try to be very accurate on that, and that means we don't get the results out within a month or two either, and that can frustrate people because we're a little slow in getting the results out. And I'm finishing up the 2023 results this week. I hope I have it all online in the next day or two, so we can get started on the plans for the event next month. So hope to see you all on there. The bottom line goal in QSO parties is basically to get people active on the air, because what I learned a long time ago, that getting people active on the air is the best way to get people to become a lifelong ham. If you don't get on the air when you first get licensed, 80% of the time you won't be on the air, period. You'll give it up and do something else. So we really try to match up with people that have gotten licensed and find some way to get them on the air and active in some fashion, and this is one way to get on. So that's my story.
Well, Tom, I really appreciate the passion you have for the hobby and also all the volunteer hours that you put into making this hobby great. I've been talking to Tom Frenaye K1KI. We both hope that you'll be on air the first weekend in May for the New England QSO Party. Thank you, Tom.
Very good. Thank you. And at neqp.org. See you later. Thanks a lot.